When people come to know of my life events, particularly the traumatic events, they want to know where my resilience comes from. How have I been able to endure what I have and still be functioning? I remember very clearly the Mayday call, that realisation that I'm sitting in the back of this helicopter, I have absolutely no control over what is about to happen. And again, the realisation that whatever is about to happen is either going to hurt a lot or this is it. This was going to be the day that I would die. So within a split second, my life had changed. I didn't lose my life on that day, but I lost the life that I knew, and everything from there would change.
A decade and a half in the Royal Australian Air Force, and the medals that she wears reflecting that, as a nurse who survived a helicopter crash in East Timor in 2004 with horrific injuries, and went on throughout her career, amongst other things, to lead the surgical team in Afghanistan, treating Australians at a time when we sustained significant casualties. And as she said to an Anzac Day audience here in concluding of her service, "I have worn their blood, so many of us have worn their blood."
Hello, my name is Sharon Bown. I'm a registered nurse of 25 years, 16 of which I served as a nursing officer in the Royal Australian Air Force. So in the lead up to Anzac Day, I have been asked to share my story of service. I am what some may refer to as a returned service nurse, having served in warlike operations in East Timor and in the war in Afghanistan. I have enjoyed a unique and privileged career in the Royal Australian Air Force. Unique because of the opportunities and challenges that my career involved, privileged because of the people with whom I served and for whom I was able to provide care, both here in Australia and across the world. But ultimately, I feel very fortunate for both, because they revealed exactly what I was capable of achieving. In facing challenge, change, and adversity, I was able to discover my true capability. Not unlike many other RNs, I decided to become a nurse because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of others. I didn't want for fame nor fortune. I simply wanted somebody else's life to be better because of the influence that I had had. So at the tender age of 23 years, having only been a nurse for 3 years, I decided that I had the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to go out and save the world, one disadvantaged person at a time. But in my youth, I felt that anyone that lived in a world that was less secure, with less opportunity than mine, was somehow in need of me being their saviour. I would learn that the people that I would care for across the world would give me so much more than I could ever give them. So in January 1999, I joined the Royal Australian Air Force. Over 16 years, I enjoyed postings up and down the east coast of Australia. I enjoyed overseas deployments, as I said, to East Timor, to Afghanistan, to Bali following the second Bali bombings, and multiple AMEs overseas and within Australia. In addition to my desire to save the world, I joined the military because I wanted to experience the uncertainty and the diversity of providing nursing care in the military environment. I learnt that I could provide nursing care at the site of a Black Hawk crash, where the only shelter was the shade of a tree, in a tent on the side of a dusty airfield, or in an armoured shipping container in the midst of the war in Afghanistan. I even learnt that I could set up an operating theatre within 20 minutes and provide life-saving surgery, although I was never required to do so. I learnt that I could provide care with varied levels of resources, sometimes in solitude as a sole provider, other times as a member of a very large multinational team. My career was indeed unique and diverse, but in the early years, I didn't think it was that unique at all. It was what all of my colleagues did, and it's what Australian rural and remote practice nurses have done for centuries. But there are two challenges, and indeed two achievements, that are unique to my career, and the first occurred during my second deployment to East Timor in 2004. I was deployed there as an aeromedical evacuation nurse, providing life-saving care to the locals in East Timor and members of the United Nations peacekeeping force. Aeromedical evacuation was a capability that the Royal Australian Air Force had provided to East Timor and to the UN mission since the Interfet days, 1999, when Peter Cosgrove led Interfet into East Timor. We had done so without incident. But on this day, the 2nd of June 2004, my team and I boarded a helicopter to go and provide aid to a woman, a local woman, who was in obstructed labour. She was in a tiny mountain village some 90 kilometres south of Dili, the capital of East Timor. The weather in Dili was fine when we took off, but as we began to approach the village, the weather changed. We had encountered a very severe storm. Whilst the pilots worked hard to navigate their way through that storm, unfortunately we crashed into that tiny mountain village in Same. My life did not end on that day, obviously, but I walked away with enduring injuries. A severe spinal fracture, a burst wedge compression fracture of L3, with significant nerve damage in my left leg. My jaw was fractured in 4 places, and my neck and shoulders had been burnt by aviation fuel. I would also end up with a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. 3 days later, in a post-anaesthetic care unit in Brisbane, I suffered a pulmonary embolism, a respiratory arrest, and I was admitted to the intensive care unit. I didn't die, but my life and the lives of those who had chosen my career were changed forever. In those early days of survival, I vowed that I would not be a victim of my circumstance, that no matter what life would throw at me, I would be a survivor. I'm not sure why I made such a conscious decision in those early days, but it is one of my clearest memories, and it is what ensured that not only did I survive my injuries and my experience, but that I continued to live. I also knew that despite the physical challenges that I would face, I wanted to continue to serve. I wanted to continue to be a nurse, to provide healthcare to the men, women and families of the Australian Defence Force, those amazing people that gave me the motivation to get out of bed every day and be the best that I could be. Individuals who gave me a reason to get out of bed every day, to be better, to be stronger, and to take what I had learnt in my experience to advocate for them in a healthcare system that they didn't always understand, and which sadly, at times, didn't understand them. I fought to stay, and within 12 months, I won. But I had changed. My ability to make a difference had changed. On the airfield in Bali, following the 2005 bombings, I had a different level of empathy for Australians injured far from home. I myself had been injured far from home. And beside the clinical interventions that they needed, I knew what they needed most of all was the reassurance that they were safe, that they would be cared for, and that we would take them home. 4 years after climbing out of that helicopter wreckage, I led a critical care team in war. Afghanistan would be the ultimate test of my abilities, as an ADF member, as a commander, but also as a registered nurse. It would take everything that I had ever known, everything I had ever learnt and witnessed in my nursing career to be able to provide care in a war zone. Our hospital consisted of a series of shipping containers, some armoured, some not. We had the best, yet the most minimal resources to be able to provide care. In the early days in Afghanistan, my team and I were presented an Australian flag. The members of Australia's Special Forces were stationed nearby, and they wanted to acknowledge that they had their own healthcare team in country. I needed to decide what to do with this rather unique gift. I couldn't really hang it out the front of the hospital because we were embedded in a Dutch hospital. It wasn't an Australian facility. So I decided that we would hang the Australian national flag in the operating theatre. Now, for those peri-op nurses out there, I can reassure you that my peri-op nurses were apoplectic. They did not want a piece of fabric hanging anywhere near their operating theatre. I wanted to ensure that when an Australian came through our operating theatre, as I knew they would, the last thing they would see before they went to sleep would be their flag. And the last thing they would hear would be our shocking Australian accents. I wanted to ensure that in that tiny little armoured corner of the war, they would feel the safety and security of home. It had taken me 4 long years, but I walked away from that wreckage in Same, and I took everything that I learnt in facing death to keep others from it. To help them navigate their own experience of service, and if necessary, their own journey of survival. Our team cared for Australian soldiers injured in the Battle of Anzac, the battle from which we received the highest number of Australian casualties in one contact since the Vietnam War. Leadership in Afghanistan wasn't just about leading my team, it was about providing healthcare that gave Australian soldiers the confidence to continue going outside the wire and doing their job, knowing that we would be there to provide life-saving assistance if ever they needed it. Sadly, I would only have the privilege of serving Australia for 7 years after Afghanistan. The injuries that I had sustained in the helicopter crash deteriorated to a point that I was no longer fit to serve. I had joined the Australian Defence Force to serve my country, and for that I felt the most immense sense of pride. To learn that I was no longer fit to do so left me with the most immense sense of shame. I lost my career. I desperately missed, and I still miss, the career that I loved. So I faced a new challenge: how to provide care, how to make a difference in the lives of others without the physical capability of doing so and without the privilege of employment. I wrote a book and became an unintentional advocate for contemporary veterans. I attained a Bachelor of Psychological Science so I could better understand psychopathology and the prevention and treatment strategies available to our veterans and their families. I gained new and exciting opportunities to influence the healthcare of our community, including an appointment as a member of the Council of the Australian War Memorial and as an ambassador for Phoenix, Australia, the Centre for Post-Traumatic Mental Health. And this Anzac Day, in the midst of a global health crisis and in the International Year of the Nurse, I will speak at the National Commemorative Service at the Australian War Memorial. Please join me at 5:30 a.m. on ABC TV. Anzac Day this year will be unlike any that we have ever known. Australians will not gather, as they usually do, to commemorate our fallen, nor to honour those who have defended our country. But Anzac Day this year offers us an opportunity to draw upon our extensive history of service and to recognise our fundamental ability to lead individuals, families and communities through significant adversity. That is what nurses do. This is the year that we can realise that the positive qualities that we associate with the Anzacs actually live on in all of us. Endurance, courage, ingenuity, mateship, good humour. I appreciate that you have always been on the front line of our healthcare system, but now more than ever, Australians are beginning to realise that too. So I will be working to create another video for you, one in which I concentrate on frontline nursing. For me, it is in the context of war, but my focus will be how do we provide care when our resources are limited, and how do we care for ourselves and for each other under such significant demand. Something that you have all experienced and with which you can identify. If you have any specific questions that you would like me to address, please send them through. You will see my email address at the bottom of the screen and at the end of this video. But as we approach Anzac Day and we reflect upon the achievements of our Australian service nurses, please know that no matter what the future holds, you will meet the challenge. It may take everything that you have ever learnt, everything you have ever practiced and experienced, but you can do it. As a patient who was repatriated to Queensland, who received life-saving surgery in Queensland, and who woke up to an incredible ICU team in Queensland, I know that you can do this. Queensland nurses have been there for me through both my physical and my psychological recovery. You are the reason that I can sit here today and tell you my story of service. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to learn of my story of service as a nurse in the Royal Australian Air Force. And wherever you happen to be this Anzac Day, please take time to remember them, lest we forget.